All right, and welcome back to the Paisan Sports podcast presented by Elevation 5280 Sports. Dante DePlacido, joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I've got to ask, what's the deal with Ashton Hall? Where did he come from? What are these morning routines? And why does he keep using Saratoga water? And what's the deal with that banana peel? What is rubbing it on your face going to do? And also, what's the deal with no socks? He's running around, he's got shoes on, no socks, and then he jumps in a pool. People didn't even think about that. You run around, you got no socks on, your feet get sweaty, then you jump in a public pool. What's going on?
I didn't even peep the socks part, but I'm like kind of classify myself. I don't even know if I would personally classify myself as that. I just like being cleansed and, healthy and, having good hygiene. So I attempt to do that, but I would be classified probably as a germaphobe. So I didn't know about the socks in the pool. That would probably really upset me.
He doesn't wear socks in the pool. He runs around wearing shoes with no socks, which if people don't know, if you don't wear socks with shoes on, it makes your feet sweat a lot more. And then you jump into a public pool with all that feet sweat. First of all, going into a public pool after a workout, I think is a big no-no in itself. You're sweaty after running on he was going full speed on the treadmill, and then you jump into a public pool. I think it's very inconsiderate. And all the clowning, all the well-deserved clowning this guy has gotten, I feel like nobody is talking about that, which I think is a big oversight.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the people that probably are clowning him on social media probably don't have the greatest hygiene themselves. So I guess, you can't get it all
Well,
right.
he's going over the top. He's waking up at 3:50 a.m. He's doing pretty much nothing until 9 a.m., where he fakes a business meeting. Going and looking at it, bro, we can get it to at least 10,000. What are you talking about? You're a lifestyle coach. What needs to get to 10,000? 10,000 what? 10,000 more banana peels for your face? I don't know. All I know is this. There would be no Ashton Hall if there was not Drew Walls. Drew Walls is the pioneer, the OG, the original one. And what did he do when he saw Ashton Hall dropping these morning routines? He came out of retirement to show everybody who the GOAT is. That's Drew Walls, baby.
I don't know who that is. So
Drew Walls, he blew up a year ago. He was originally getting clowned a year ago when he blew up because he would just film himself like working out and then going on a Target run and then cooking food he got from Target. People were clowning him because like there would be so many different shots of him like driving his car, parking it, walking through the aisles, which would mean he would have had to keep setting up his phone on the tripod every single time. Like he would have to set up his tripod, drive away, then drive back, grab his phone from the tripod, and then actually drive off. So he was getting clowned a lot for that. And then he came out of retirement when the whole Ashton Hall thing happened. And now everybody's like rallying behind Drew Walls because he is the OG, the GOAT. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I guess, everybody will dog on you at the time being. And then once there's a new person that can fill your void, then, you just become a part of the crowd that was, of all those people that was dogging you before. So, Ashton Hall, actually, though, like since you sent that to me, like you texted me and I had no clue about it. You were saying that it was on what, Instagram or Twitter?
Yeah, it blew up over Twitter.
I see.
He
I
has the
literally,
most viewed
let's break this down
video
real
in
quickly.
all of Twitter now.
So I try and post as much sports content as I possibly can for social media. I always tell people I don't even know if I would have like all the social medias if I wasn't creating sports content all the time. So I go on Twitter daily, but I have a lot of like notifications that I get on Twitter, like from people that I follow, that I get their push notifications straight to my phone. So I see a lot of Twitter stuff that way, and I'm not really always scrolling on the timeline. And I only scroll on the timeline of like the following, not really for the for you side of it. So that's what I got going on with Twitter. I'm on Instagram and Facebook the most. So I'm always scrolling on Instagram and Facebook, the feed. So I see a lot of stuff on there. TikTok, I might open TikTok literally once or twice every 2 weeks. Like, and we're talking when I open it, maybe someone sent me like DM'd me a video or something. But other than that, I really don't go on TikTok at all. I go on YouTube, but I mean, I feel like on social media with the presence nowadays, you'll just see stuff on all the following or like the previous social medias that I just said to you instead of like going onto YouTube for it. But what I did see was I was interested in this dude, like why he even like, because you have to have like a certain status to even have like a video like that go viral. So I was wondering why that dude, obviously he's ripped out of his mind. So a part of that physique, he was a running back at Alcorn State, it was in like 2014 or 2015. I think his career total was like 6 carries for 8 yards. For a guy that looks like that, that's pretty underachieving, but he doesn't even look like a running back. I mean, he looks like a straight up like a off-ball linebacker or something. That's how
Well,
big that dude is. So.
he's a lot larger than when he played college ball. So
Yeah,
that would
obviously.
say
That
he
was
showed
also
up
what,
in
10
when he was
years ago. So he has
21.
10 years of weightlifting under his belt. So
Yeah,
who
because
even knows what
he's
shape he
transitioned
was.
more into like being a bodybuilder and a lifestyle coach. So he's going for more mass than practicality, which by the way, not to get into a whole other thing, but I think that's a huge issue with today's society, and male beauty standards. But anyway, the one thing is I did want to start today's show with me dipping my face in a bowl of Saratoga water on ice. I went
Call
to
me
Target
stupid,
yesterday.
more so naive, I would say, but don't call me stupid, but I would say more so naive. I don't even know what Saratoga water is.
Saratoga water is just a brand of sparkling water that he's constantly using throughout
So
his videos.
Saratoga is the brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, I actually thought, but making sense, I quickly shut that down in my brain because it doesn't make sense at all. Like the bottle itself, like sparkling water looks like an alcoholic bottle, like a liquor bottle, just like the way, like by
Some
design,
of
like
them
a
do.
lot
I
of
would
them
say
do.
that brand kind of looks like it. It looks
Oh,
like a
I thought it
top
was like
shelf
he was like
vodka.
he had like some like I thought there was like an alcohol reference to that whole video until I realized like you're not gonna dip your face in alcohol, like you literally burn your
Well,
eyes, burn your face.
a lot of people are parodying it, and some people are using like tequila or something and dipping their face in it for like the parody. I saw some like 9-year-old woman did a parody today, and she did that, and then it just cut to her like in a helicopter firing a machine gun, which was pretty funny. She was like super old. Um, but I did want to start today's show with the Saratoga water and me dunking my face in the ice water. I went to Target yesterday. They're completely sold out. This shit is flying off the shelves right now because of this guy's stupid morning routine.
That's what happens though, is that's the type of effect that these type of like viral videos, like any type of product, like if he would have had, say for whatever reason, it's baseball season obviously starts today and is right around the corner. Say he's jacked like that out of his mind, and then you see this dude rocking like a 2009 fighting necklace around his neck. Do you think that would become like a popping product again?
Oh, I know you're talking about one of those
The
like
Fightins,
braided
wasn't that what it
necklaces
was called? It
things.
was like the entangled like shoelace type like
Yeah,
necklace.
yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. I mean, I could kind of say, I think with water, it's a lot easier because it's like you just buy a bottle of it real quick from the store, $2. You post a photo with it, you
Yeah, but
post it
is that
on
expensive?
Twitter.
Like Saratoga, I haven't heard of that brand before. That's
I
what
think
I
it's like
assumed
two
that it was.
dollars a bottle or something like that. I'm not
I'm
quite
always
sure.
trying to get the cheapest water that I
But
possibly
all
can.
I know is they owe him a massive check. I'll tell you that. But anyway, let's not get caught up too much on this clown. Um, because he also did get evicted at some point. You brought to my attention. I think you were even gonna get to that when you started what you were talking about, and
Yeah, I
then you went
mean,
a little off
he got
topic. But
evicted. You said that the timeline of him getting evicted doesn't match up with the social media video. I just read it on Facebook. I don't know if you follow the page NFL memes, and
yeah,
there's like an NBA memes account that I think is too, and they don't really post anything that's like actual important, but they post like viral stuff like that. So he made it onto that page, and they said that he had got evicted because he cloned the key to his apartment so that whoever he gave that key to had all the amenities that he had access to. So that person was able to swim in that same pool all his
hmm.
dirty workouts have been marinating in.
Well,
So
I think that was probably a different building then if he had gotten evicted, and this was before all this.
yeah, I guess that's true.
And
But I mean, he
there's a
still
lot
has
of
the same.
speculation that that's not actually his building. It's just an Airbnb. Who actually knows? But anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to the fight in Phil's, who opening day is today. I actually I was just scrolling Twitter just now, and I saw that most of the opening day games are all at 4 o'clock. There's only like 2 or 3 after that. I think this is horrible scheduling by the MLB. But anyway, Phillies first game
Yeah, I mean,
today.
they don't
Zach
like.
Wheeler on the mound versus Mackenzie Gore.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the MLB sets the regular season up the way that they have. Are you a
It's
fan of the
weird. They
Tokyo
play
series?
one game on Thursday. What's funny is, so in my office, I had the Phillies schedule for the past 3 years in my office because we send out like Phillies calendars every year. And the last 3 were just, sitting there on a filing cabinet. And I noticed the last 3 years, opening day is the last Thursday in March. Then they take that Friday off, and then they finish the series on Saturday and Sunday. I don't get why. I don't understand that. I don't get it. Just start the season on Friday.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They also kind of like made it weird. The last podcast we did was last Tuesday, and we specifically went later this week so that we could match it up with pregame for the Phillies game. But last Tuesday was actually the first MLB game of the season with the Tokyo series between the Dodgers and the Cubs
Oh
that took
yeah,
place at 6
forgot about
a.m.
that.
So, being a diehard sports fan that I am, I mean, I would just happen to be up working out in the morning, so I did end up able to catch the game, but no one in the U.S. was really watching that game at all, unless you were up for whatever reason at that time in the morning. So I don't know why the MLB sets it up like that. They obviously want to showcase their players internationally. And there's a big lure, obviously, with the market that Shohei Ohtani has opened up for the league and the way that they can market themselves. But, you know, I guess it is what it is for those two teams, but I want to start that. Like once you start a game like that, it makes like spring training like irrelevant. So like since last Tuesday, I couldn't even think about a spring training game for any team in the entire MLB. And last year was actually the way that you said things, like how they start on a Thursday, skip the Friday, then go Saturday, Sunday. You remember last year, the only home game that the Phillies had rained out was actually opening day. So they started on Friday. So
Oh, I didn't even remember that.
yeah, so they started the game on Friday, and I'm pretty sure that's when they had a lead the entire game, and then they ended up blowing it at the end of the game, and the floodgates opened. So I mean, that
Yeah, it
was
was a
obviously
bad start to the season. I do remember that, and I remember expecting it to be like the entire first month slow start as it had been the previous 2 years. But after the first 2 series, I think was the Braves and the Reds, if I'm not mistaken.
I think there was
Um,
one. No, there was one that was
no,
mixed in
it was
before that
Rockies. I think they started the season with, then Braves, then
because
Reds.
the Red series was when Bryce had that 3 home run game. That was
Hmm.
like the first week of April, or like it was like the first or
Yes,
second
I
week of
think those
April.
were the first 3 series. I think they started off bad against Rockies and Braves, and then maybe also the Reds. But after that, things
You know what's
picked up.
crazy is the Rockies have been so irrelevant for so long that I forget. I have to remind myself that they're in the National or American League a lot of the times. I,
Remember, we're Elevation 5280 Sports.
yeah, that is true too. I didn't even know what you were
You're gonna get
getting
us
at.
fired talking bad about the Rockies.
I mean, I think they would relay the message. So I mean, they got Jokic. They get to talk about they
That's a
had a
good
Super
point.
Bowl from
That's a
back
good
in the day.
point.
They had Peyton
If
Manning
you're
as
in
their quarterback.
Colorado,
They've
you have
had
enough to be happy about.
Denver sports has had a lot of success. So I mean, and their football team's in a good position now. Their basketball team has one of the best players of all
Yeah, and they
time
just
on
won
it.
a Super Bowl in 2015. So
Yeah, exactly. And so, and they look like they're building back up. But
I have
yeah,
no idea about their hockey team. I don't know much about hockey.
yeah, not too much
What
going on
are
with
they? The
hockey.
Wild? Is it the Denver Wild?
That's the
I don't know.
Minnesota Wild, I believe.
I think
No,
that I think you're right. I gotta look this up now. I'm
no, it's the
curious.
Colorado Avalanche, bro. It's not Denver. It's
That's
Colorado.
what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got me
I
going
do
through a loop
not
here. I had
know
to like
much
think. I
about
had to
hockey at
dive all the
all.
way in real quick.
I know the Anaheim Ducks.
How many teams are there, real quickly? We're not going to go on a hockey tangent, but I just want to quiz you real quick on your sports knowledge. How many teams are in the NHL?
I want to say 30. I know Canada has 6. I know that fact.
7.
What did they get a new one?
Nah, that's been a thing. 7 forever.
No,
But
no, no. It was always 6.
it's been 7, and they have 32 teams in the NHL now. They
Mm.
added the Vegas Golden Knights, who actually like
Oh
won
yeah,
the
that's right. They
championship.
did
Like,
add 2
I'm pretty sure
expansion
the
teams.
Vegas won the championship a year or 2 after becoming an
Yeah,
expansion team. They
that I
made it to
did
the
know.
finals the year. Actually, I think they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals the year they were an expansion team, then won it a couple years later, which is actually outrageously impressive.
Yeah,
And
that I
they also
actually
added the
did know.
Seattle Kraken too. The Seattle
I
Kraken.
also know Ovechkin is about to break Gretzky's record. That I know. I know that much.
Yeah, but screw the hockey talk right now because we're gonna go down a pigeonhole. Phillies opening day lineup. They finally have made a switch that a lot of people have been asking for. A lot of people also say their argument is, well, they've had a lot of success, and look at how far they've gone with Kyle Schwarber as the leadoff hitter. And we gave out the stats. I think it was 85% of the at bats for Kyle Schwarber since being a Philly have been in the leadoff spot, and like 68% of his home runs have been solos. So that may change. That could also change with the handedness of the pitcher that they're going up against with more pitchers in the major leagues
Yeah,
being
Rob Thompson, I
right-handed.
think, mentioned he would base the lineup depending on
So
pitcher
that's just going to
handedness.
kind of flip-flop it. Do you think that's a hedge in a way?
What do you
You think
mean?
that's kind of like a hedge where Rob Thompson just kind of like doesn't truly want to commit to Trey Turner being the leadoff and still wants to go with Kyle, but he's willing to kind of hedge it in between with switching based off the handedness? Or do you think this is just the way that he optimally thinks? Because the Phillies, they haven't brought too much in. The two biggest acquisitions, or three, I would say, are Jordan Romano. They got Max Kepler, and they traded for Jesus Luzardo. So those are the three biggest names that they brought in, and they have a lot of talent, and they could obviously overperform of what they gave up to get those guys. But the big splashy move hasn't been there for the past two off seasons since they signed Trey Turner. So a lot of the thinking is we can just change things subtly with the roster that we currently have, and that would open up a different avenue for this team to reach its success. So how do you feel about that? Do you think switching the lineup is actually going to benefit this team, or do you think they actually have an issue with these guys kind of regressing in a way just based off of age and the talent not being up to par with what it was in the past couple years?
Well, I think so. They're facing a lefty today, so Schwarber's not leading off, obviously. Um, so I think we'll see if it's very consistent that lefty Turner leads off, righty Schwarber leads off, and I do think if that is the case, today's game is going to give a lot of fans false hope, seeing Schwarber out of the leadoff spot, thinking that's just going to be the norm moving forward because it's opening day. Um, so I mean, really, it's just something we'll see with time. I'm very excited to catch the start of today's Phillies game. I unfortunately won't be able to watch the entire game because I do have other stuff to do. But I am definitely going to at least try and catch the first two trips through the order and see how this lineup fares. I do think it's also interesting they have Bohm batting third, Harper second. I want to see if
Well,
Bohm is
that's the thing
effective in
also
the
is
field.
when you switch the starting lineup based off the handedness of the pitcher, you're not going to be able to most likely have Bryce stay in that two hole when Schwarber's batting one.
I think with a talent like Harper, you give him a spot in the order and you keep him there. I think with a guy like Harper, you don't move him
But
around.
also Harper has been vocal about how he sees himself as a prototypical third hitter in the lineup. So I feel like
Yeah, and I
if
agree
that's
with
his
him. I kind of
preference,
don't love him in the 2 hole.
I
I
love
would
him in the
prefer him
two
in the
hole.
three
I mean,
hole.
I think two hole is literally perfect. I think anywhere from 2 to 4 is perfect. In the one hole, it's just I feel like that would even be more so of not being able to get like as much RBI production, like even more so than what Kyle Schwarber gives, because like Bryce is just like one of the best hitters in all of baseball, and like what he can do, he does so much more as a batter than what Kyle Schwarber does. So I feel like that would be a waste there. Even though you see other teams like Shohei bats lead off for his team, Francisco Lindor, and some of the other top level teams do that, but maybe everybody is willing to buy into what Rob Thompson is saying. And if he's going to, doesn't want to completely move off Kyle from the leadoff hitter, but he's willing to switch Trey there on occasions, then I feel like Harper not wanting to bat second will do it on the days that he needs to and then go back to the third spot. But that just really messes with the entire lineup and how things are mixed around. I don't even know, I don't think there's going to be a stretch where the first 2 to 3 weeks of the season they start off slow and then they start drastically changing things with the order. But outside of the top four, And we haven't even unveiled the new lineup since we've been teasing at it. But here is the new lineup for you guys for opening day specifically, and then we'll see how it's utilized moving forward. Shortstop Trey Turner bats first. Bryce Harper first base is second. Alec Boehm third base is third. Kyle Schwarber DH is fourth. JT Realmuto is fifth at catcher. Max Kepler left field is sixth. Nick Castellanos right field is seventh. Bryson Stott second base is eighth. And center fielder Brandon Marsh is ninth. So I feel like anybody in this lineup, like I said, depending on how they start the season, I don't think it's going to matter too much. But I think what they will start picking at is 5 through 9 if things aren't working to get an energy boost. Maybe like the 5 hole is like the new reset of the lineup. Like you get your top 4 hitters, and then how are we going to produce after those top 4 hitters leave or have already batted? So I think that's really where they need to figure out how they're going to construct it. Right now, 5 through 9, JT is 5. Kepler 6th, Castellanos 7th, and Stott 8th. I feel like Castellanos is kind of further down. I would probably move Castellanos to the 5 hole.
He is pretty far down that lineup. Yeah, that is one thing
I would
noticed.
feel really good about my top 6 being Turner, Harper, Boehm, Schwarber, Castellanos, Kepler. I'd feel amazing about that. But then, I mean, you end the lineup with Realmuto, Stott, Marsh. If Marsh can be more consistent and Stott bats, like, say Stott gets in between from he was batting like 230-ish to 240 last year, and before that he was batting like 280 at his height of his career. So if he can get to like 260, he would give you production at the bottom of that lineup. You would have JT, who's kind of fading as a batter, and we don't know how healthy he's going to start. But one thing I will tell you is Rafael Marchand, who made the team as the backup catcher because Garrett Stubbs didn't have any more options left to get sent down, or he didn't have any more options left to get sent down, so Garrett Stubbs did. But I think that was a natural progression of this roster anyway, because Marchand is an extremely superiorly talented player.
So goddamn relieved to see that Marchand made the roster instead of Stubbs.
But on a day that you would agree, though, you would agree on this. On a day that Realmuto isn't going to start, or say he's banged up for some time, you're not going to put Marchand at the 5 hole.
Probably not. No, you'll probably swap him with.
I don't even think it's under consideration. I think the highest you consider Marchand in the lineup would be 7, if that.
I do want to say, though, that I am much relieved to see that Stubbs is not in the major league roster this season. Me and you, I feel like, have both been very adamant on this podcast of how much we do not like Garrett Stubbs. Not like as a person, but
not
as
personally, it's just as a player.
And as a player.
Like for like a role of, it's almost like the situation like Taijuan Walker is in now with Ranger banged up and starting on the IL. Now it's like, oh, now we got to use this dude again. It's like you can't have another viable backup option to turn to than Garrett Stubbs or Taijuan Walker for those positions.
Yeah, and I think Marchand is a much more viable option. Stubbs stinks. Bottom line, he stinks. He can't hit well. I will say the one thing about him is he has a decent arm, and it seems like I don't even have full confidence in that.
I don't know. For me, I like having backups that like compare to the player that I have starting. So like if I'm missing that guy, then he can, somewhat fill in some of the duties and roles that he needs to play. So I guess, the one compliment I'll give Garrett Stubbs is for a catcher. He's a good base runner, but
he is a good base runner. But so is Marchand. Marchand is too. And Marchand has better defense. He has a rocket arm. He can actually hit. The only thing I don't like about it is I think Marchand is such a good prospect that I think it's a disservice to him that he's only going to start like once a week. You know what I mean? I think he should be getting consistent starts under his belt. So I think like if we had a better option than Garrett Stubbs, I would rather see Marchand down in AAA, just progressing more rather than playing sometimes in the MLB.
But this could kind of be an easy role. Stubbs, well, this is also the thing I was going to get at. This was a topic I had later on, but it's kind of sparked my interest to bring it up now. Is they're going into the season, the Phillies are with JT, Ranger, and Kyle Schwarber on expiring contracts. So
you're not keeping JT. Do not keep JT. I think aging. He's not as
I think
good
Ranger is
anymore.
absolutely gone. I don't even know if Ranger's going to be on
You
this
got to
roster
keep
when they
Ranger.
trade him.
You got to keep Ranger.
There's
Let
no
JT
chance.
walk.
There,
Let JT
I'll put a
walk.
side bet that
Especially,
Ranger.
especially if Marshawn looks really good as the backup catcher and JT continues to regress this season, then absolutely let him walk and just hand the reins over to Marshawn. And then prioritize keeping Ranger, or unless I don't know, maybe Painter really shows
I
you
don't think there's
something.
any chance Ranger is on this roster next season.
Well,
I don't
I
think there's
hope
any
you're
chance.
wrong.
I mean, he's consistently hurt. He's good, but at times,
He's great.
he's.
Love Ranger Suarez.
I mean, he tailed off
All I need is your
dramatically last year. Tailed off.
love
So with
tonight.
Ranger, I feel like it's a situation where they already gave a contract to Christopher Sanchez before Ranger, and now Christopher Sanchez is like hyped up. I mean, we see the national media putting Christopher Sanchez on this pedestal of like him being a legit Cy Young candidate. I think he's actually the most bet on pitcher to win the Cy Young award in the National League right now. You saw the
Really?
contract they gave him. Jesus Luzardo is the same age as us and has a lot of talent. He was also Jesus Luzardo was the number 1 overall pick a couple years ago. So I could see him being a part of their future plans. Andrew Painter's obviously going to come up at some point. I mean, like Mick Abel is nowhere near Ranger Suarez, but he's somewhat of an option that could, bring up from the minors. Tyler Phillips just got
I'm so sick of
traded.
Mickey.
So the guy that they didn't trade a starting pitcher for, didn't. The reason why they didn't trade for a starting pitcher at the deadline last year, Tyler Phillips is now traded for cash considerations. So.
I did
I
see
just don't
that.
really see Ranger being on the roster. I think they would have already worked out a deal. I think they would have signed him at the height of his powers last season, and they didn't end up doing that. So, but that's interesting that all three of those guys. I think out of those guys, I think we would all agree that Kyle Schwarber is probably the main priority. A guy like that, you can't let him walk with 40 home runs. And that's also a guy where he most likely is going to age the best out of all those guys with what his responsibility is of just being a power hitter and being able to play that DH role. So um,
I
it's
do.
interesting that they didn't get those guys wrapped up because if they didn't spend a lot of outside money, they didn't really treat the guys in-house either too well. So I know they gave Matt Strong the extension last year during the season. So, but
I do want to talk about the final roster that was basically released earlier today. Um, I want to talk about mainly the pitchers, right? Because in terms of starting pitchers here, you got Nola, Sanchez, Walker, Wheeler, and Luzardo, right? But then looking at the bullpen, you got some good names. You got Jose Alvarado, you got Tanner Banks, who I like. You got Kirkering, who I like, and then you got and Strom, who I like. We'll get into him in a moment. And then you got Jose Ruiz. Oh, and Jordan Romano. But then you got Jose Ruiz and Joe Ross. I guess you know what? Now that I'm actually
I've
looking
heard
at it,
from numerous like top MLB insiders that they keep saying Joe Ross might be a sleeper signing. I don't really know too much
this is
about
the
Joe
first
Ross,
I'm
but
hearing his name. Who the
I've
hell is this
seen
guy?
that might have been like the most minor deal that they made in the bullpen this offseason, but I've heard a lot of people say that they get it. And all those guys, they had to just be able to be good for what, an inning or two, a couple days a week. So it's not like we're relying on these guys to be workhorses. Like the starting pitching conversation and the relief pitching conversation are two different conversations in itself. So we know the starting pitching and the starting rotation is classified as a top 3 consensuously around the league, if not the
I
best.
think I think it's second to the Dodgers. I think this starting rotation is easily second to the Dodgers. I think if you're just a baseball fan in general and you're looking at the top starting rotations in the league, I think Dodgers is easily the best, and then I think Phillies is easily the second best. I think the Dodgers are that much ahead of the Phillies in terms of their starting rotation, but I think the Phillies are that much better than the other ones across the league that they're easily the second best.
Yeah, one of the biggest injuries that happened to a starting pitcher was the Yankees got drilled with Garrett Cole going down
Mhm.
for the entire season. So the
Yeah,
Yankees aren't
it's a
even
tough
being
break.
talked about as the team in the AL to make it to the World Series again like they did last year. They obviously lost Juan Soto, but they bounced back. They got Cody Bellinger, who's not the same exact player, but Cody Bellinger is a former MVP and phenomenal player in himself with a championship pedigree. They also signed Max Fried away from the Atlanta Braves, and they added Devin Williams from the Brewers to their bullpen. So they made some decent moves. They also signed Paul Goldschmidt, too, the former Cardinals first baseman. So the Yankees made some moves, but a lot of people are fixated on what the Boston Red Sox did with Alex Bregman going over there and then trading for Garrett Crochet. And the Phillies were actually
I like
big
Crochet.
time in on Garrett Crochet. The Phillies did everything they possibly can to try and get Garrett Crochet, but the Red Sox made a better offer. So they pivoted and ended up getting Jesus Luzardo for a lot cheaper, which could prove to be an extremely good deal. But a lot of people think the Red Sox are actually going to come out of the AL right now. If you look at like the World Series odds and everything, 5 of the top 6 teams to win the World Series are a National League team. So this is a different type of dynamic going into this season. So with that being said, we know how good the NL East is, the best division in all of baseball, and I don't even think it's remotely close. You have 3 of the best teams. I would say 3 of the top 5 power ranking teams or top 6 to 7 power ranking teams sandwiched into one division. Do you think it's going to play out to where all 3 of these top NL East dogs make the playoffs like they did last year?
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
also saw
Well, we talked about that last week. I said for my, prediction for the Phillies this season, I think they finished third in the NL East
you
with
remember how it played out
about
last season,
90.
though, right?
I expect them to win at least 90 games, but I think like 92, 93 wins. I think that's how many games they'll win, but they will come third in the NL East and make the playoffs as the second wild card team.
Well, you remember what happened last year for all that to play out was there was the doubleheader on the last game of the season between the Mets and the Braves to get into the playoffs, and they
Oh yeah, I
both were
forgot all about that.
actually
Yeah.
vying versus each other. And then the Diamondbacks were actually the team that didn't make the playoffs with 89 wins. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
forgot
you
about
just
that.
said 90 wins, 90 to 93. You would put them at 93 would probably
I
get
would
them
say
into the
92
playoffs.
or
But
93 wins in that low 90s range,
yeah,
but a
so
little
I
more
mean,
than
it could
90.
get a little scary. I think everybody really thinks that. So let's see exactly. Um, pull this up real quick so I can get into this. Hold on.
But the other thing with the roster that came as a surprise to some people, Cody Clemens has made the roster. So the backup infielders will
You know,
be.
it's the least talked about thing of all time. The
Hmm.
least talked about thing of all time is how he's Roger Clemens' son. It's the least talked about thing
Yeah,
in the
no one ever
history of
really talks
baseball.
about that, do they? Yeah. If
Nobody,
his name was Roger Clemens Jr., it would be talked about a whole
like
lot
no one
more.
ever. It's not like his dad was just like some random dude in the MLB. Like
Speaking of former elite athletes and their sons, a former Eagle. I'm not sure if you knew this. So Elijah Holyfield, the son of Evander Holyfield, who had a very brief stint with the Eagles. He was on their preseason roster 2 years in a row. Actually had 5 special team snaps for the Eagles. He's now a WWE wrestler. Didn't know that up until a few days ago. Shout out Eagles legend Elijah Holyfield. Big dude.
also, I mean, it does get talked about, but it's something that a lot of people don't know is the Phillies GM is Don Mattingly's son,
That makes a
Preston
lot of
Mattingly.
sense. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Preston Mattingly. I mean, that's not the most common last name that you would find out there just floating
Yeah,
around.
I,
You know
I
what I mean?
hadn't
So.
even. I thought like, oh, Mangley, like Don Manley, but for some reason I did not make the connection in my head.
So you're gonna put them at 93 wins. So is that where you're gonna lock in? So that would
92 or 93. That's what I'm feeling.
so 92 would put them at what? 92 and 70. 93 would put them at 93 and 69 for the season.
Nice. Yeah.
So I mean I think that's very doable. Obviously
I
health
would say I
is
would say
gonna
Phillies win about 93, Mets win about 96 or so, and then Braves come in with about like 102. That's my prediction for
Braves
the
with
top 3 teams in the NL
102.
East. Yeah, they're coming back healthy. I mean, other than them
I
losing.
mean, they're good. I'm a big, I'm a Braves fan, but I believe in the talent that they have on the roster. They're playing without their starting catcher for like the first six, and they're starting like a rookie catcher, I think, for the first like 6 weeks at least for the
Yeah, but
season.
knowing the Braves and the good luck they have, this catcher is going to be out of this world.
But also, Ronald Acuna was the fixation that everybody talked about. But last season, Matt Olson was not the same Matt Olson that we saw in previous years. Austin Riley was not the same Austin Riley that we had seen in previous years. So, I mean, they also, like I
That's a good
said,
point.
lost Max Fried in their starting rotation. Chris Sale was unbelievable last year when they were completely banged up. But I think it's really going to come down to the health on the roster and everybody getting back to full strength, which not all of their I mean, they still made the playoffs, but not all the reason why they couldn't go far into the playoffs was based off of injury last year. There was also reclining play based off of I don't know if that was the environment of not having those other guys that were injured around them to protect them in the lineup or what, but they just didn't play as well as a season. But that was also was gonna when you said 92 to 93 wins for the Phillies, I was thinking to myself, do you think it's gonna be like a roller coaster like we saw last year where they started off so unbelievably hot and then the last 69 games of the season they were barely 500, or do you think it's going to be more consistent of the team that they
I
were? Because
think
they
I
sucked in
think
the beginning.
considering
They
the
sucked in the
age,
beginning last year. They were extremely good from like if I had to put a percentage on it, I would say the first like 12% of the season last year they sucked, and then they went on this stretch from like
I'd say it was like the
thirteen
first like
percent to
3%.
yeah, like
It was like the
13% to
first
like
two series of the season is when they sucked, and then they
yeah, where
got
yards go, I
red
think was
hot
it.
after that.
Yeah, and then they got hot
And
for like
Turner was
3
batting
months.
red hot, but then he got hurt. I remember Turner was batting above like 400, and then he got hurt. Um,
Well, last year,
but
what do you think the biggest reasons why they got that hot were
well, I think a
Bryce
big
wasn't even on
reason
fire in the
they
beginning of the
fizzled
year. I think
out.
Trey was very consistent at the beginning of the year. Ranger was going crazy along with the entire starting rotation, pitching extremely well and actually having a four deep at least starting rotation at the time. And then also, um, I feel like they just were each. There was a guy that was stepping up um, every day. You know what I mean? Brandon Marsh
I
also
think
started off
I think
extremely hot
when
too.
you look at the Phillies falling off, I think the big thing to look at is the age of the team. When you get up into your 30s like that, you're not as good throughout all 162 games. You start to fall off a bit as the season goes on. I also look at the fact, Spencer Turnbull, as your fifth starter was pitching lights out, and then he gets hurt, and then one of your famous quotes from the podcast, the Phillies have some reinforcements coming in way of Taiwan Walker. Then he comes in and he pitches just god awful. Every fifth game was a guaranteed loss. I think that definitely hurt him. And now we have another injury in the rotation, and we're gonna have Walker every fifth start again. I think though, if
I don't want to
Painter's
hear it, but
pitching lights
as
out
much
in
as
the
everybody hates
minors and Walker's pitching horrible in the majors, you're going to see a swap there. I think
It's
they're going
just
to have a
we're
very
not gonna
short
we're
leash
not
with
gonna
Walker
bail
this
out all
time
the other
around.
players on the roster by just always blaming everything on Taiwan Walker, though. That's
No,
literally
I'm not blaming everything on that. I'm saying the
he
main
stepped on the
reason was
mound for
probably the
he
age
stepped
of
on
the
the mound what
players.
20 times last
I
year.
also think Bohm participating in the home run derby could have hurt his swing because he wasn't as hot after that All Star
Well,
break.
he also had like a nagging wrist injury that zapped all of his power. So that was like something.
Yeah.
Bryson
So
Stott
no,
was
there's a
also
lot of
dealing with an
reasons,
injury.
but Taiwan Walker was definitely also a reason. He had nothing to do with them losing in the postseason, obviously. The bats were just cold by that point. But I do think every single fifth start being a guaranteed loss definitely played a part into things. Because it's not like the other four games are guaranteed wins. But anyway, that's my prediction for the season. Before I give my meatball of the week, do you want to share a certain prediction of yours?
Well, just with the Phillies, I mean, my prediction, I think they're going to be an extremely good team. I think they match up pretty well in their division and the entire MLB as a whole. I think their competition is within the National League itself. Would you agree in saying that the team that comes out of the National League is most likely going to win the World Series?
Um, Not necessarily, because it's not always about
Who would you put as
which
your actual
team had the most
American League
regular
teams?
season success. I think all three of these top NL East teams are going to go to the postseason, and I think it's just going to come down to which one of the three is the hottest at the start of the postseason. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the one that wins the NL East.
No, I said the National League. I'm saying how much better the
Oh,
National
I was
League
thinking
is
NL
than.
East. Yeah, I could agree with that. I think that National League has much better top end talent than the AL. Yeah,
Who
I
would you
could
put
agree.
at as like having a chance in the American League?
I would say the Yankees. Honestly, I would say the
Just
Yankees.
one team?
I would say maybe look for the Orioles to bounce back strong. Maybe look at a comeback from the Texas Rangers. They were looking really good a couple years ago. So I would put,
Yeah,
I would
good.
put,
Yeah, they were looking good enough to win a championship.
yeah,
That one's gonna forever hurt because that's one of those where you kind of the hindsight of it is like, yeah, the Phillies would have definitely beat that Texas Rangers team
yeah.
in the World
So
Series.
I would say outside of the Yankees, I would actually put the Orioles at a close second, and then and also look out for the Sox, man. Look out for the Red Sox.
So you're hyping up that
Um,
So pretty much what you're saying is the American League East is what's going to be the pop in division.
Actually, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that in my head. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I think the worst team might very well once again be the White Sox. Um, I think the Nationals are going to be a bit better this year than they were last year. I really like Mackenzie
Nationals
Gore.
have
I think
talent.
he's
It's
going
just
to
about
step
like
up a bit this season.
they're in the stage where they'll be good in a couple of years. It's just they're like
Yeah,
in the beginning
no,
stage.
they have a really good young core. I like their
Yeah,
rebuild a
between
lot.
James Wood and CJ Abrams. I mean, that's two
And
guys
I
that you
really
can
like
really.
Mackenzie Gore. He had a
And you got Phillies
3.9
killer in there
ERA
too.
last year. I see Gore being low three, maybe even sub three ERA this season. I think he's a really underrated talent. But anyway, now it's time for my meatball of the week. My meatball of the week. Actually, I have two meatball of the weeks. My first meatball of the week is Matt Strom with sort of like a Jesse Biddle-esque injury, maybe like a Zaire Smith-esque injury. He missed his start at the end of the spring training because he chipped, broke, did something to his fingernail after packing up his kids' toys. Very eager to get out of Florida, which, Matt Strom, I don't blame you. Who the hell wants to be in Florida for that goddamn long? But ends up injuring his fingernail. Not even his finger, his fingernail. Misses his spring training start, and that's how his spring training ended. Matt Strom, your meatball of the week number one. I guess we'll go right into meatball of the
I'm
week
trying to
number two.
think
I
about
wasn't
how
sure.
I
Yeah.
would like politely word this.
Hmm.
There's like here's how I would say this. I feel like relief pitchers on the totem pole of athletes are a distant relative of kickers and punters in the NFL. If you understand what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I can see what you're saying
Because of
there.
like
I'm picking up
they're
what
like
you're putting down.
like if
You're
you
putting
see
it
some of the
down, and then I'm picking it back up.
if you see some of the pictures and like their physiques and looking like George Niang out there, who we'll get to in a little bit, but built
Hmm.
like George Niang and just out there pitching, and just you hear these stories about dudes eating what 11 to 12 to 13 cheesesteaks when they're in Philly for a 3-game
Well, you
series.
know
You know what
what?
I mean?
In all
All those
fairness,
little things.
the two MLB players who were most infamous for what they consumed in their careers were position players, that being Babe Ruth and Wade Boggs.
Have you heard this story? Not to get off traffic, but did you hear the story about Mookie Betts currently?
Oh yeah, what's going on with him? Isn't he like he's been vomiting a ton for like 2 straight weeks? That doesn't sound
I
good.
think there's something going on with the food that he was eating in Tokyo that just like didn't like cooperate with his
Too much
stomach. But
sashimi,
apparently,
maybe.
he went to
Gotta
spring
watch out for
training.
that sashimi.
He went to spring training at 175 pounds, and he's been throwing up for like 2 to 3 weeks straight now, and he's 150 pounds
Yeah, that's
right
not
now.
good.
And he hasn't
I'm
eaten
legit
solid
worried
foods in
for
like
him.
two
That
to
does
three
not
weeks.
sound good.
I mean, he hasn't eaten solid foods like for 2 to 3 weeks. I
Yeah.
noticed that he wasn't playing in the Tokyo series. I didn't know like what the reasoning was, and then I ended up seeing that, and the Dodgers ended up sweeping that series without Freddie and him in the lineup. Just shows you how good they are. But I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, getting back to pitchers and kickers, like with Matt Strom, like some of these injuries, I mean, I don't even know what to say about it. It's like some of these, you hear about guys. I watch UFC and MMA, and like, like imagine like saying I can't fight today because my fingernail hurts. My fingernail's all messed up.
It's a different thing with baseball. You gotta get the right grip on the ball. I think he still probably would have been able to, but spring training, so it's just like whatever. But anyway,
Do
now
you
it's
think
time
it
for
was like a
meatball.
excuse? It was like a. Do you think he used that as like a scapegoat excuse to get out of his spring training start because
Yeah,
he didn't want to
I
fight?
think so. I don't think it was like dude,
If that's the actual
I
case,
can't pitch
then
with this. What a lie,
if
you
that's the
know.
actual case, if he said that to get out of a spring training start, then as much as like arguably the most talented reliever on the Phillies, I would not feel good about that if he's making up crazy excuses like that to not pitch. But
Well,
apparently,
like
that's not the first time that he
I
did
don't
that.
think he was like making it up as an excuse. I think like maybe he chipped his fingernail. It would have been like, okay, I can still pitch, not at 100% effectiveness, maybe like 80% effectiveness. It's the last spring training start anyway. I might as well not do it. You know.
I feel like
Um,
there's so many different scenarios in baseball where it's like, it's 162, bro. There's way too many scenarios in baseball where it's like, we
and
played
this
so
is
many
only
games,
spring
bro. We
training.
don't gotta try.
Who cares about spring training anyway? It's time for my second meatball of the week, and then I'm going to let you talk while I go to the bathroom, actually. But meatball number 2 is Bang Bang George Niang for getting into an altercation with Quentin Grimes. It seems like George Niang is always getting into altercations, but he got into one with the greatest Sixer of all time, the biggest Sixers process legend. This is now the process 2.0. He's the first process 2.0 legend in Sixers history, Quentin Grimes, getting into an altercation with them, talking crap, saying something along the lines of, if Maxey and Embiid were on the court, you would be in the same role I was in. Yang, you have one thing you're good at. And you're not even like that good at it. You're pretty good at it, but you have one thing you're good at is spotting up and shooting. You're fat. You're out of shape. You're not athletic. You are nowhere near the basketball player that Quentin Grimes is. George Yang, you're my second meatball of the week. I'll be back.
I don't even know how
Rant.
it's like a flex to even, try and like put somebody down by saying, "Oh, you would be in the corner of Joel Embiid or Tyrese Maxey." Yeah, Tyrese Maxey is a top 25 player in the entire NBA. Joel Embiid, when he's healthy, is a top 5 player in the entire NBA. So for what George Niang is even saying, he's actually the player that is the least talented player that was probably on the court at the time of him saying that compared to what the Sixers are even putting out on the floor. And obviously, his team is decent, but George Niang, just I've never liked him as a player. I always thought having a guy like that on the court. He also plays like the small forward position, so he's out there covering the most athletic guys out there. There's a reason why George Niang's career has never gone that way. But one thing I will say about George Niang is it's very impressive that he's been able to make it in the NBA that long with that type of physique at a player at that position because. Sometimes you see bigger guys, like taller guys, being a little bit chubby like that, but George Niang is just a whole nother ballpark of the physique of a basketball player to the norm. So, and he's not effective. It's not like he's out there and people say, "Oh, Luka Doncic ballooned up to this weight, and that's why the Dallas Mavericks traded him." But he's bringing his team to the finals. George Niang isn't even a good role player in that. So you see how he's like one of the least impactful role players in the entire NBA. So for him to even say something that crazy, it's just that just shows the player that George Niang is, and that's just psychopathic crazy to me. To think that you're getting the upper hand in trash talk when you're pretty much describing what you are and just trying to reflect it onto somebody else. So Quentin Grimes is going to be a part of the NBA itself and most likely the Sixers for the next 5 to 7 to 8 years. And George Niang will probably not be in the NBA, even though he's already had a decently long career, probably in the next year or two, I would say. So that's just all I really have to say on that. We have Dante in the bathroom right now, and then after that, we're going to talk about some Sixers talk and how good they have gone with tanking. Um, to the point where they're losing to some of the worst teams in the entire NBA. And some of these teams that they're matching up with um, are teams that should be beating them. They're also trying to lose. There's a league-wide issue with tanking right now in the entire NBA. And some of these teams that the Sixers are playing have came on the back end of their schedule for the month. Like recently, they have played the Pelicans, which they just lost to. They played to the Spurs. They played the Wizards, the Hawks. That was with the George Niang back and forth. They played the Thunder, who's one of the best teams in the league. The Mavericks without AD, who's back now, but without AD and Kyrie Irving at the time. The Rockets, second best in the West. Pacers, playoff top 4 team in the East. Raptors again, which are right there with the Sixers in that scenario. So, I mean, the Jazz, they beat the Jazz, but all these teams that I have just mentioned, they beat the Mavericks, they beat the Jazz, but all those other teams they lost to. So that's a really good thing for the Sixers. It's looking more and more likely that they're actually going to be able to keep their lottery pick. Dante, you got
Not to cut you off. I'm back, by the way. Not to cut you off, but last night I did simulate. Like if you go on the Tankathon's website, you can simulate the lottery. I simmed it 10 times, just to get an idea on what kind of odds we're looking at. Hold on, as I plug in my laptop. And now I know 10 isn't large enough of a sample size to really give you a good idea, but I wasn't going to sit there and spin 100 times. But I can tell you, out of those 10 spins, they lost their pick only 2 of those times. And once they got the number 1 pick. So, yeah, it's looking good that they're going to keep their pick. Losing to the Pelicans was huge. I don't know if you touched on that, but
I just broke down all the teams that they have recently played and what they've done. They've only beaten the Jazz, who, even regardless of what both teams are putting out there, they'll probably beat the Jazz on those nights, even though they're still playing Lauri Markkanen. But it looks like Tyrese Maxey is pretty much in bubble wrap for the rest of the season. Obviously, PG and Joel Embiid are out for the season. Andre Drummond continues to be banged up, so I think they're
even
just going to hold him out as well.
Even
So
Hood Shafino is just gone. It's like he started playing a little ball, so they said, get out of here. But yeah, no, I mean, losing to the Pels was huge because now you have the possibility of leapfrogging them. You only have 3 more wins than them now. They've gained some ground, away from the Toronto
the thing with the
Raptors.
Pelicans is like the Pelicans still play Zion and CJ McCollum. They just had Trey Murphy's like the most underrated player in the NBA nowadays. He's like averaging 21 points a game. Like anybody that doesn't watch the NBA every night be like, who? Trey Murphy? What is going on over there? But he got had a season-ending injury. So they're playing CJ McCollum and Zion every night, which obviously 2 really talented players. Zion, former #1 overall pick. But the guys that they have going out there with Zion and CJ are just unbelievable. Some of the guys that they're throwing out there with them, the guys. So even with those guys playing, it's still going to be hard for the Sixers to make up ground. And we're also talking about, I think my birthday is April 11th. So the last game of the season is usually like right around my birthday or like the 13th or the 12th or something like that. So I think the last game's like, for the Sixers, the last game is the 13th, like I said. So they'll be playing the Bulls that night. So they'll end the season with the Heat just beat Golden State last night. And I was watching that game, and it was like the big Jimmy Butler versus Andrew Wiggins trade thing. The Heat have only won, I think, once or twice since the Jimmy Butler trade, and they just beat Golden State. But obviously, Golden State's without Steph Curry at the current moment. But the last 4 games of the season, they're going to play the Heat, the Wizards, the Hawks, and the Bulls. So pretty much 4 teams that are in the bottom 24, I would say, like bottom 6 of the NBA, bottom 8 of the NBA. I mean, the Bulls are actually trending in the right direction. They're playing really good basketball at the moment, but we don't know how the playing is exactly going to turn out. But all those teams right there, I mean, those are definitely some losable games. You play the Knicks, who are going to be getting Jalen Brunson back in the beginning of April, so you'll lose that. Got to match up with the Raptors coming up on Sunday, which is a huge game. But that's also coming off.
That's another big one.
So Heat Raptors on a back-to-back is where the money's going to be made. You got to lose both those games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, listen, they impressed me last night by losing to the Washington
And the
Wizards.
real races, we're not, we can't really look at like a team 3 ahead. The real race is still trying to get below where the Brooklyn Nets are, because that's the team that's been
Yeah, well, they've been neck and neck with the Nets. Now, for some reason, the Nets hold the tiebreaker over the Sixers, which is a good thing. So as long as they finish with the same amount of wins and losses and the Nets, the Sixers will be, up higher in the lottery odds. But yeah, last night I actually placed a parlay on the Sixers game. I had them losing. I had Quentin Grimes dropping 20 plus. I had some other legs. The one that screwed me though was I took Gershon's under, which he shattered. He
What was
shattered the
crazy
over,
was
and that was the only leg I lost, which
the
sucked.
thing about the Raptors were the Raptors have talent on their team. They have RJ Barrett, they have Scotty Barnes, and Brandon Ingram has the most fatal sprained ankle we've seen in the history of sports, where he literally has not played since being traded over there. But they have talent on their team. So yesterday I hit an NBA parlay. Let me read the parlay off to you. Posted in the Discord. I had a little free bet, so I just threw it in there. No sweat bet. Took the Lakers versus the Pacers. Took the Raptors over the Nets, which was a big time game for the Sixers, looking at the tankathon efforts. But the Raptors in that game were plus 102 on the money line, and they were starting RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes. And I looked at the Nets roster, and they're starting like D'Angelo Russell and a bunch of random dudes outside of that. So I was like, Raptors look like they're going to coast, and the Raptors literally won by 30. So I took them. I took the Clippers over the Knicks that don't have Jalen Brunson right now, so they ended up winning. And then I took the Celtics over the Suns, and that game wasn't even close. So, but I took the Lakers also, and I don't know if you saw the LeBron tip in last night, but LeBron was in like uncharted territory. He had
He
two.
also killed my Lakers parlay by only dropping
Yeah,
30,
I almost used my no
13
sweat bet
points.
on a player prop for the Lakers game, and I'm so happy I didn't, because LeBron had 2 points at halftime, and then he ended up scoring 11 in the second half, and he ended up having
I
a
just
really
needed
good
I just
stat
needed
line.
18 from him. I just
He
needed
just
18 from him.
he had a prime Ben Simmons stat line last night that was actually
Yeah.
impressive for LeBron. 13,
Yeah,
13, and
13,
7.
7, and 7. Those are
That
Ben
was
Simmons
13,
numbers.
13, and 7. He had
Oh, it's
13
13.
rebounds.
Oh, it was Luca who had 7 and 7.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, so bro, if you want the Lakers, bet the Lakers money line, bet Luca like 7 or 8 assists, LeBron 7 or 8 assists, LeBron 8 rebounds, Luca 8 or 9 rebounds. It's like the
that's
easiest bet of all
basically the
time.
parlay I built with the Lakers last night, except I took LeBron at 18 plus points. And I was using ESPN Bet because
Yeah, I
I
saw the promo on there. They had a promo, because I look at ESPN Bet. They always have crazy exclusive promos every single day on there. So I looked on there. They had a profit boost on Luca, KD, Devin Booker, and LeBron to all score 20. And anytime they put
oh, I
something up
didn't
like
see
that,
that.
that looks like such a virtual lock, you're like thinking to yourself, like, something's got to be off here. And then obviously LeBron was the one that ended up ruining that exclusive promo. But the
Anyway,
NBA,
though,
everybody kind of is talking about the product of the NBA not being as interesting. There's a lot of injuries, this, that, the other. But with the Sixers being this bad, I kind of wanted to dive into the rest of the NBA, like the national NBA. I always have been a huge fan of just the NBA in general, but I put a lot of focus on the Sixers. But with the Sixers not, filling the void for me now of being so bad, I watch a little bit more national basketball than I have on like the primetime games. And there's been some good basketball being played. Like, these top end teams match up extremely well with each other. So I'm excited for the playoffs and basketball, even though everybody really just kind of shits on the product that the NBA throws out there now. I mean, if you really watch the games like in closely and intently, I mean, the Lakers Pacers game last night was one of the best games that I saw all year.
mm. Yeah, I used to. So during the original process, not the process 2.0, the original Tankathon, I used to watch a ton of national basketball just because, the Sixers were so underwhelming. Like, I used to always make sure to watch Thursday nights on TNT, just because I
Yeah.
love, inside the NBA. And I used to watch a lot of the Warriors, but
That's also where we'll be getting our lottery standing. It's on that show. The lottery.
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they
That's
do a
exciting.
pregame. They do a pregame before the primetime games, so that's always hype
Oh,
that we'll have
wow.
like
Yeah, I'm
the inside
excited
the
for
NBA
that
on there.
then. I wonder who will represent the Sixers this time around. I think most recently it was Joel Embiid. That was back during the draft where they
Who
traded
was it? Who was like the
Mikal
really
Bridges.
big time player that represented a team a couple years ago? They got the number one pick and they were like cheesing the whole time. Who was that?
I don't remember.
That might have been the year that it might have been when someone that wasn't supposed to get the number one overall pick ended up getting it, and they were like cheesing from ear to ear the entire time. So, but yeah, I mean that's going to be a big time. We'll be like a couple months into the Philly season. We'll know the draft, um, the players that the Eagles have drafted, and if they add any more free agents, and then we'll possibly know if the Sixers have a chance at having an opportunity to draft a franchise changing player. And I mean, Cooper Flag is phenomenal. They also have the kid on his roster, Canupel. I always mess up his name though. The other extremely good player on Duke, and I think he is somewhere slated within the top 10 of the draft. So I wouldn't be mad about getting him as like a 6'6", 6'7", facilitating wing. Um, I like him. I like the two Rutgers kids as well. There's a couple foreign guys. They're at the top of the draft. So as much people are, have the blinders on for Cooper Flag, we talked about this on a previous podcast. There's a lot of impactful, changing, franchise changing level players that are involved in this draft as well. So
Yeah, no, I
it's
think
not
as
just going to
long
come
as
down
they
to getting
keep
Cooper
their
Flag. Like
pick.
if you're getting any top 5 pick, you're going to be able to put them onto this roster and potentially blossom it. And like sometimes
Yeah.
like the kid that the Atlanta Hawks drafted, Ricochet, or Zach Ricochet, however you want to say it. He was like seen as like a glorified role player, but there's times where he's went off in games this year and looked extremely well, and he has all the measurables to be an extremely good NBA player. So sometimes even the Hawks had a franchise player already on the roster, and then you just get one that may be seen in a different role now when you take him, but you never know how that's going to play out 5 years down the line. I mean, there's been a lot of rumors for Trae Young even being traded. The Hawks ended up trading DeAndre Hunter instead of Trae Young with all those rumors like last offseason, how he could maybe go to the Lakers or the Spurs or whatever. So you never know how a franchise is going to be operated. So one of these guys that we take now, even if the Sixers don't get the number one overall pick, you might see him as, like he's a position of need, but he's not really that much of an impactful player. But you don't know the role that he's going to blossom into, depending on like if they get rid of Paul George or Joel Embiid on this roster, or how he fits with the rest of the roster as well.
Yeah, as long as they keep their pick. I mean, listen, I want them to get the number one overall pick. I'm rooting for them to get the number one overall pick. But what I'm mainly rooting for is for them to just keep their pick. It would be such a waste of a
I feel
season.
like the one thing that could arise that would be interesting is Dylan Harper is like a 2 guard, and he's one of the kids from Rutgers. They have Ace Bailey, who's like the Kevin Durant prototype, and then you have Dylan Harper, who is like the 2 guard. But Dylan Harper, as a guard, is also 6'6". So I feel like a lot of people would say, "Oh, we have Maxey, we have Jared McCain, we also have
Grimes.
Quentin Grimes now. Like, do we need another guard? If he's the
No.
best player that's on the board, and he's 6'6" compared to 6'1" Tyrese Maxey or 6'1" Jared McCain, I think it's a no brainer that you would take him if that's the talent
Well,
that
yeah,
they
you
have.
would take him, but you would also be like, okay, well,
Well,
another
that's what I'm
guard.
saying.
Let's
You
see how
can't
that
you
this
can't get
plays out.
picky when you're picking in the top 5 of the NBA. There's 5 total positions in the NBA. Pretty much 3. I would say the center, the 2 forward spots kind of blend in with each other depending on size and what you're able to do, and the 2 guard spots can blend into each other as well. You can't get picky in the NBA. There's only a certain selection of a high level talent. Like, oh, we want to go get the next successor of Joel Embiid, but you're going to go draft a center that isn't as talented as other players that are available just because it's a position of need. I don't think they're going to do something like that.
Yeah, no, my closing statement about the Sixers is listen, say what you will about them. but this team damn sure knows how to tank. This is a team that's been there before. They've tanked. They revolutionized the tank. They did the draft lottery odds got changed because of how well the Sixers tanked. In fact, across sports, teams started mimicking the way the Sixers tanked, and now they're back out of tank retirement and they're tanking all over again, baby, and they're doing it well. My God, this team could tank. But it's time to move on now. Let's talk about one of the most
Real
puzzling.
quickly, I had one thought that triggered my brain just because you said that. Remember the year where it was what was it, 2 to 3 years in a row? It was like the Lakers, Celtics, and Sixers all drafting like 1 through 3. It was the Celtics, Lakers, and Sixers, like literally all 2 to 3 of those
Yeah, that
years.
happened like twice.
Yeah. So I think it was literally the exact same order 2 years in a row. And just look at where the Lakers and the Celtics are at and the Sixers are at.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Celtics tanked and literally actually had the most successful tank arguably in the history. I don't even know if they would consider a tank. They got those draft picks from the Brooklyn trade.
Well, here's the thing. The Sixers might not get great results out of tanking, but the act of tanking itself, they do quite well.
The Lakers took all those players.
Games part is what they
the
do
Lakers
very
took
well.
those players from that
it's a
tank.
team that only won 10 games the one year. They know how to lose.
The Lakers took those players from the tank and turned them into Anthony Davis, that turned them into Luka Doncic. And the Sixers are just the Sixers
Listen,
are just...
we got the tanking part nailed down. We need to nail down the turning that into a great team part. But the tanking part, that they have nailed down, and that you cannot take away from them. Anyway, though,
if they didn't imagine since the tank, they didn't give out a max contract. Imagine how this roster would look if they, besides in homegrown guys, like they didn't go out in free agency and Tobias Harris, or like even make the Jimmy Butler trade or make the Paul George move. Say everything they brought in-house, like they gave Joel his max, they gave Tyrese his max, but it was just bringing guys in like that and then filling the roles in around them. I think they would have had just as much success, if not more, than what has transpired.
I think you're probably right. But anyway, enough about the Sixers. We got to talk about some puzzling NFL news, at least puzzling to me, is the Giants, after bringing in Jameis Winston, which I thought was a great move for the Giants. I'm not even just saying that. I think it was a great move. You look at a guy like Jameis Winston, he's in his early 30s. He still has potential. It's something that, like, if it ends up really working out, then he's a guy you can keep around for a few years. He's a guy that, you can pair with Malik Neighbors, and they might at the very least put on a show for the season. And it's kind of like a low risk scenario. But then they go ahead and they bring in Russell Wilson, which makes absolutely no sense to me. We talked about before on this podcast. Like, it makes no sense to bring in a 36-year-old quarterback when you're a rebuilding team. By the time the roster is where you want it to be, Russell Wilson, first of all, I think he currently is too old and can't do it anymore. But, by the time the rebuild is done, it's not like he's going to be your guy. Maybe Winston could have been the guy. Maybe Winston by age 36, 5 years from now, is playing at a high level. Who knows? But, 5 years from now, a 41-year-old Russell Wilson is going to be on the couch. You know that for a fact. And you bring him in on a 1-year deal worth $21 million. I just don't see the logic behind it. I think it made sense for a young rebuilding team to just roll with Jameis Winston.
Up to $21 million.
No, it's $21 million, but 10 of it is guaranteed.
It's incentive based, so they're not paying him fully 21 unless he hits the incentives.
I think from what my understanding of it is, it's $21 million, but if they end up cutting him, he still gets $10 million, hypothetically.
No, it's incentive based. So basically, what they're paying is
there's no way there's $11 million in incentives.
They're basically what they're paying is how it's painted is they're paying $14 million total dollars to Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson as veteran quarterback options compared to the Daniel Jones contract that they didn't give. But the funny part is somehow all these numbers of these guys that they bring in or keep or whatever always equates to a little bit more money than they could have just paid Saquon to still be on the roster.
Yeah. But I really think they should have just brought in Jameis Winston. I didn't see the point of Also
I mean,
bring in
Jameis
Russell
is
Wilson. And I
Jameis.
feel bad for Jameis now. I was like, oh, wow, Jameis, he gets another shot at being the starting quarterback. And that's like, nope, here comes Russell
There's not
Wilson.
a single team in the NFL that views Jameis Winston in the ballpark of a starting quarterback. They see him as talented. They see him as somebody that can move the chains at times, but his decision making is honestly one of the worst. For a guy with his talent level, he has the worst decision making. It's like I don't even know who I would compare his decision making to, but he's one of the
Jamarcus Russell.
he's so unbelievably bad at making decisions at times that I mean, he will always put you in a hole. So he's good for the minimum. Even if he starts 10 games this year, he's throwing 22 interceptions. That's what he
That's the
does.
thing, though. It would just be a fun season. He'll throw a bunch of bombs to Malik Neighbors. He'll also throw a ton of
There's a
interceptions.
difference
It'll be
to
a
it though.
fun season. They're a young, rebuilding team. They don't need a safe, practical quarterback like Russell Wilson. It makes no sense to me. It
I
makes
mean,
no
they're trying to
sense.
be Russell Wilson is guaranteed a better player than Jameis Winston. I don't even think it's very
Yeah,
close.
he is a better player, but that's not the point. Why do you need the better player? You're a bad team. It makes no sense to me.
That
You
what
know,
I don't even know what you're trying to get at. How does that make sense at all?
okay, it's like, okay, let
Their
me put it
coaching
like
regime
this.
has been there.
What if the 2008 Detroit Lions decided to trade a bunch of assets for Tom Brady? Would that have made any sense? Was Tom Brady a better quarterback than Dan Orlovsky? Absolutely. But would it have made sense for them? No. So it just doesn't make sense to bring in Russell Wilson to the
That's
Giants
not
at
even
the
and
current
you just
state of their
compared so what you
organization.
basically just said, you said, "Let's go out and get the, well, let's go out and trade for a player that is gonna cost the most out of anybody, arguably in the history of the NFL, compared to signing somebody on a free agent contract for 1 year." How is that
The
comparable?
I'm just trying to give you an extreme example so you can
Yeah, that
kind of get
didn't make
the
sense at
scope
all.
of
You're just
what I'm
talking about
saying
trading, like,
here.
multiple
There is
draft
no
picks.
need to bring in you're a bad team. This is going to be a bad year. It's
How do you
another
change the culture of
rebuilding
being a
year.
bad team?
What?
How do you change the culture of being a bad team? You bring in a competent quarterback.
Who's going to be there for 1 year? What's the point? There's no point. There's no
I mean,
point
there's a
to it.
big point. You're missing the bigger picture. First off, they have Jameis on a 2-year deal, so Jameis is the insurance option. You think Tommy DeVito's NFL starting like Tommy DeVito still being in the NFL is pretty crazy to me.
No,
But
Tommy DeVito is
you
not
have
your
Jameis
NFL starting
Winston on a
quarterback.
2-year
No.
deal. Russell Wilson's there for 1 year. The reason why they most likely did it is because we don't believe in Shador Sanders to go pick him at number 3. So let's go get 2 veteran quarterback options so that we can take the best player at 3, like a Travis Hunter, have a
But
veteran
you don't
quarterback.
need Russell Wilson to do that. You can just do that anyway.
I don't
You don't
understand
need
why that makes
Russell
you upset.
Wilson to do
What
that.
you sound like you're like low key scared of what the Giants could produce, like what they
No,
produce with Russell
not at
Wilson. I
all.
don't
I'm
understand
just
why you're
saying I
getting
think this
mad.
is a dumb move for them. I am
Bringing
not
in
even remotely scared
an
of the New
all-time
York
level
Giants.
quarterback is a dumb move for a team that has been so bad, for a regime that their GM is on the if anybody in sports is on the skin of their teeth from being fired, it's that GM of anybody. We're talking about
Like, let
a
me ask you
whole
this. Would it have made sense for the White Sox to have signed Juan Soto in free agency? No.
yeah, yeah, I mean, any team would sign
No.
Juan Soto.
Oh my
No, because
lord.
the conversation would be, would it make sense for Juan Soto to go sign with the Chicago White Sox? Then you say no. But for the
Bad
Chicago White Sox
teams.
to go sign Juan Soto, does that
If
make
you're a
sense?
bad team, you
100%.
have to wait until you are on the come up to bring in the top talent who's of appropriate age to grow with the rest of the team. Just bring in a 36-year-old quarterback and just for 1 year just
Yeah,
does
he's a
not make any
bridge gap
sense to me.
quarterback that's trying to like set the culture for when they actually get their guy in the building. They actually know what success and winning actually kind
But
of
they're
looks
not
like
going to
from
see success with him to be like, oh, well, look at the success Russell Wilson had with the Giants.
Well, I'm
I
not
need
going to
like
argue
that.
here. Like
They're
you're
not
like
going to
making
see.
me
They're still going to be a very bad team this
you're
year.
like bringing it down to like the negative part to like make me like try and like vouch for Russell Wilson. Like I think this is like a game changing move. I'm just trying to tell you that bringing in an
I think
all-time
I think
level
it's a
quarterback
stupid move.
when you have Daniel Jones as your previous starter, you had Eli Manning who won 2 Super Bowls but also turned the ball over and wasn't the most talented quarterback of all time. And you have had so many issues there. Your coach is on the brink of getting fired this year. If you're another top drafting team, your GM's going to get fired, and you're trying to look for a solution after you met with the Eagles in the playoffs in 2022 and have gone absolutely downhill since then. So I feel like, I mean, I don't know if it makes the most amount of sense for what the position that their offensive line is in. The Giants, since I think 2022, have allowed 180 plus sacks. And Russell Wilson, since 2022, has been sacked over 130 plus times, which for a quarterback is the most, and for a team to allow that much is the most in that time period. So it's not going to be a match made in heaven, but I mean, some of these other options out there, like, are you going to go into a season if you don't believe in this quarterback draft class of forcing a draft pick to be one of those guys or Tommy DeVito?
But you don't have to do that though. That's what I'm saying. You can have a bad
Right. Lay out
season
the plan
and
for me
wait
then.
till next
Lay out
year
the
to
plan, because
draft
you're
the
just
top
like
quarterback.
arguing.
You
We're
don't
arguing in
have to
circles
do
here. Lay out the
if
plan. Lay out the plan, because you have this belief that Jameis Winston's actually good, which is crazy.
No, what I'm saying is he would at least be entertaining. You know, he could at least get the ball to Malik Neighbors at times. But my point is it doesn't make sense for them to bring in a good quarterback. That's my whole point. I think it made more sense with Jameis Winston because it's kind of like you're taking a risk with him. You know, it's like maybe it pans out,
I can't
probably
wrap my
won't, but
brain around
maybe.
that thought. That just doesn't
You
make
know,
sense.
I think
Imagine
bringing in
trying
an
to imagine what you're
experiment
saying right
makes
now.
a lot more sense than bringing in a good quarterback. If you're a bad
Imagine what you're
team,
saying
bringing an
right now.
experiment makes more sense.
Imagine what you're saying right now, pitching that to an NFL GM. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to bring in a good
I'm sorry.
quarterback. Like,
Are we supposed to act like the Giants GM makes competent decisions?
I mean, he also the thing was he tried everything he could to trade up for Jane Daniels. He literally just could not make it happen last year. That was all. That's
I
what
mean,
they
and
said.
while we were just on the topic of tanking, I mean, look what the Sixers did throughout the process. They brought in experiments. Robert Covington was an
It's not
experiment.
even.
Jeremy
Yeah,
Grant was an
bro.
experiment. Christian Wood was an experiment. And if you're a bad team and you're not expecting to win anyway, then it makes sense to bring in experiments to see maybe it pans out. It probably won't. Most of the Sixers players during the process did not pan out. 90% of them didn't.
That is
The
such a
Jakar
bad
Sampsons
comparison,
of the
bro.
world,
We're
the
talking about a
KJ
sport.
McDaniels
We're
of the
talking
world,
about a
the
sport that has
Lavoy
5
Allens of the
players.
world.
There's
You know, those
10
guys
total
did not
players on the
pan
quarterback.
out.
No,
You're
no, no,
not
no, no, no,
trying
no,
to
no, no,
bring
no,
in
no, no,
good
no, no, no.
talent.
Let
That
me
makes
talk
no
for a second.
sense.
Let me
It
talk
makes
for a
no
second.
sense.
No, you're literally trying to compare a sport that has 10 total players on a floor and 22 total players on the field at one time. That there's no comparison to make. I can find to find a random NBA player to go play one of the 82 games in a season is on another level to easy to comparing to like going and throwing out the most random Joe out in the NFL. Like it's not a thing you can do in the NFL. That's not an option. That's not a thing. There's no team that operates that way, and you'll have no fan base, and you'll not be able to generate anything. So I don't
They're
even know
already not generating anything.
Bro, they're in the biggest market in sports.
And how's that working out for them?
They
Not
suck.
well.
You're like forcing me to defend the Giants. Like you're forcing it because you think bringing in
Well,
a
you
good
are
quarterback
defending them.
is a bad move for an NFL team, which is just an unbelievable thought
Yeah,
process.
if they were a good team, then if they were good, like okay, let's say
Okay,
they
so you want so let's paint this picture. You want Tommy DeVito for 17 games, a Tommy DeVito level
I never
quarterback.
said Tommy DeVito. Let me put it like this. Let me put to you like this. You look at the Jets a couple years ago, a team that the roster from top to bottom was very good, except they did not have a quarterback. A team like that to bring in a Russell Wilson, that makes sense. That would make sense. That is the type of team that bring in a 36-year-old quarterback who's still good, but not as good as he used to be on a 1-year deal just to see how it goes. That makes sense. But a team that is bad, that they should probably lose more games than not, especially if they don't draft a quarterback this year and maybe wait until Arch Manning next year. It just doesn't make sense to bring in a better quarterback. It just and to spend money. It just does not make sense to me.
So the
I
guys that are
don't see
making it,
what that is going to accomplish.
the
They're
guys
not
that are
going to
making
win this upcoming year.
the
They're
guys that are
not going to
making these
win.
decisions, are also the guys that are going to get fired if they are the worst team in the NFL again this season. You
They're going to
understand?
get fired either way. They're out of the door.
Okay, so if
that was your whole
you're going to get
argument,
fired,
if your whole argument hold on, because I'm going to give you some props here. If your whole argument was, well, I think the Giants decide to sign Russell Wilson because they want to win as many games as possible so they can keep their job, then that I would agree with. But in terms of the team's overall success down the line, over the next few years, it doesn't make sense. But if you're saying, listen, bottom line is I think they just brought him in to try and win more games and save their jobs, then I would say, okay, that actually checks out. That makes sense.
I don't know why it came. I don't understand why it took this long to come to this conclusion. That's
well, you didn't mention that up until now. You did not mention that up until now. You're talking about.
I thought it was pretty apparent. I think it's
quarterback.
I think it's pretty apparent that they're trying to compete. I mean, I think that's pretty apparent for a regime that got completely embarrassed on national TV last year. I think they're trying to compete, and also a team that hasn't made the playoffs in that long, that has a top draft pick, that are making some of the moves that they have made. They're trying to compete and they're trying to rebuild this roster. And they have a young superstar wide receiver who you want the most talented possible option to bring him along and further bring him along.
Well, no, I think with a guy like Malik Neighbors, Russell Wilson, does he still have the arm strength to bomb it downfield to Malik Neighbors? I don't know, but that you kind of want a guy with a strong.
You remember the throw he made versus the Eagles this year, right?
What's that?
You remember the throw he made in the red zone versus the Eagles this year, right?
I actually don't recall.
Absolute dime. One of the best throws I've ever seen. Just right in the pocket. It was like a corner route into I would say right where like the S in Eagles, the logo.
All I remember from that game was the 10-minute drive to end it. That's kind of all I really remember from that game at this point.
Yeah, we never even touched on how everybody hyped up that situation between Darnell Washington and Darius Slay in the back of the end zone and everything, and like how all the young dogs came to his defense, like Quinyon went to go after Washington after the play and everything, and now they're teammates.
Yeah, that's kind
of Pittsburgh,
funny.
And how that brought the Eagles close together. But yeah, I mean, we just argued about Russell Wilson to the Giants for 20, 25 minutes. So
and now we're out of time.
But there was a couple more topics I had to hit because I did not want to keep going in the revolving circle of talking about Russell Wilson and just saying the same exact thing.
All right, well, let's speed through it because I got stuff to get done for the Phillies game.
That was obviously the Giants, who they draft. That looks like that could possibly open up to them take BPA, best player available, with the 3rd overall pick. Maybe it's still a quarterback if they believe in one. I feel like they're going to go to the route of most likely either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter would be probably the ideal fit, but if you had Abdul Carter to Brian,
if you had Abdul Carter to any team, I mean, there's not a single NFL team out there that does not have a use for Abdul.
He actually didn't work out at his pro day. He's not going to work out
at
the pro day because he's still banged up. But the last game that I watched him play was versus my Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and he looked really good in that game, and he was banged up throughout the game. But if the Giants add that to their pass rush, they have Kayvon Thibodeau, who they might move on from if they ended up drafting him. That could be an option, but they would have those 3 guys in the arsenal. Or you have Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter. Or you can have a quarterback with Malik Neighbors, but I think
that is the thing about this draft is the Giants are either going to be able to get, a great quarterback, Abdul Carter, or Travis Hunter, right?
Because, but the lure of taking a guy, Travis Hunter allows you to fail possibly twice.
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe he works out as a wide receiver, but he doesn't work out as a corner, and vice versa.
Giants have the kid from Maryland that they drafted in the first round a couple years ago, Banks, who's a decent corner, but he hasn't really lived up to his draft slot. You throw him on the other side. They lost Adoree Jackson to the Eagles, so that helps their secondary out tremendously. Also, they lost talent overall in their secondary when Xavier McKinney ended up leaving. They just added Javon Holland, so if you get Javon Holland with Travis Hunter, that makes your secondary a lot better. Or you can play them on offense where they, Darius Slayton is a decent wide receiver, but he's more so of a 3 than a 2. So you have Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter, or maybe you can just mix them into offensive packages since you already have Malik Neighbors and then start him mostly on defense. So I just feel like that gives you so many different options. And I would rather see, from the sake of being an Eagles fan, I would rather them draft Abdul Carter and have to deal with Abdul Carter than have to deal with Travis Hunter. possibly playing on either side of the ball. Because I mean, the Giants got the Cowboys got Micah Parsons, and we actually aided them in getting Micah Parsons, making the trade with them to get Devontae to move up, and they get Micah. But Micah's been on that roster, and what have the Cowboys done since he's been on the roster and since the Eagles drafted Devontae Smith? So I'd rather Abdul Carter go to the Giants than have to deal with Travis Hunter playing on both sides of the ball for the Eagles' sake. But yeah, that's going to make things interesting. And then whatever the Giants do at the top of their draft, like that could be the spot where if Shador doesn't go number 3 or number 2, he's going to probably start to fall and fall and fall. And then there's going to be teams that trade up. There might even be a scenario which it would be pretty far fetched, but if there's some crazy scenario where Shador is there at 32, not saying the Eagles are going to draft him, but the Eagles could start to get calls about that 32nd
Yeah,
overall
sort of
pick.
like a
Someone
Lamar
move up to
Jackson
get
thing,
Shador.
but I don't think Shador would fall
Yeah,
nearly
but
that
that
far.
was the first thing that thought in my mind is like, I don't think Shador will fall because he's seen as the number 2 guy in the class, and Jackson Dart's even getting slotted into the first round. But you got to think about how talented Lamar Jackson was and how far he fell. And Shador is nowhere near as talented as Lamar Jackson
Yeah,
was.
but I mean, something I've sort of covered is like teams' draft strategy when it comes to quarterbacks have shifted ever since that draft. With Lamar ending up being as good as he was, and then you look at the likes of Josh Rosen coming out of that draft, and then the proof is in the pudding with Kyle Murray going number 1 the following year. I think if not for
Well, do
that
you think
draft,
that's the
no
most
shot
impactful?
Kyle Murray would have ended up going number 1 overall.
I think that's the most impactful quarterback moves that's happened in probably the past decade of the NFL is the pivot that the Cardinals made from picking a top 10 quarterback one year and then the next year drafting the number 1 overall quarterback. I think that's one of the most important things that's happened the past decade of the
And
NFL.
you know what? If it weren't for Call of Duty, that would have ended up working out swimmingly for them. But unfortunately,
I just
Call of
random thought
Duty
today
didn't
about
exist.
how the Phillies can't get their outfield corrected and like players like retiring early because I just was listening to a podcast where Puka Nakua just said he wants to retire at the age of 30 so that he could have 5 boys and run around with them and stuff. And he was going down the line about that. So I was thinking about early retirement. Imagine the Phillies can't get the outfield corrected over the next couple years, and their solution is AJ Brown retires from the NFL and goes and finally plays baseball in the MLB. I just randomly thought
Okay,
about that because
now
I was
now
thinking
we're
about
just
like
coming up with anything.
no, I just thought about like 2 sport athletes and how him, Kyler, had the pedigree. Even Russ himself had the pedigree of playing some baseball back in their heyday. So, but some other interesting things before we get out of here. Eagles, they're prepping for the draft. We're today's Thursday, so I think we're 4 weeks out. Yeah, we're 4 weeks out from the NFL draft. So pretty much, I don't know if I think it's 4 weeks. I believe March always messes me up in the beginning, but April 24th, we have the draft on Thursday. Eagles are obviously getting ready for that. They got the top 30 visits coming up and going on. One thing that I have realized is of all the signings that they have made, it has been a little underwhelming of an off season, but they have made some moves. They have still yet to address safety or off-ball linebacker. They signed 2 off-ball linebackers in Zach Bond back and Ben Van Zumeren, who is listed as a fullback but has played off-ball linebacker in his career. But they have not signed one that hadn't been on the roster beforehand, and they had also not signed a safety since moving on from CJ Gardner-Johnson and having some. So those are 2 positions that I expect them to address in the draft, but where they address
I
them
don't
at
think I
will be a
think off
question.
ball linebacker. I mean, you address that later in the draft. You have your 2
Yeah, I'm not
solidified
saying the
starters
beginning. But
in
this
Dean
draft
and
has a collection of players. There's numerous off-ball linebackers that are also like edge rush, third down specialists that are in
yeah,
this draft.
you have Bond, you have Dean. Those are your 2 starters. You also have Trotter Jr. I think they're pretty high on him. So I mean, really, like that's like a day 3 pick. Just somebody for depth
I mean,
purposes.
I would take. There's a lot of good linebackers that usually go day 2, so you could find a really good one
Yeah, but
on day 2.
I think it would be a waste of a pick to take a
Jacoby
day
Dean's
2
hurt.
linebacker who's going to be far down on the depth chart and possibly for a long time. So
Yeah, well, I just can't get fooled by. I think at where they got him at was a good draft pick, but the expectations that some people have just because he's Jeremiah Trotter Jr.'s son
Well, but
is
he's
a
not even
little.
one of the starters, though. That's what I mean. Like that's
Yeah, but you're
that's
talking about him. You talk about him as if he can just like immediately go in and fill in for Nakobe Dean and play that role if
I
needed.
think I think if he had to come in for a couple games, he would do well. But
We don't
right
know how
now
long
you have
Nakobe
two
Dean's going to be hurt
solidified
for.
starters in Vaughn and Dean. You just gave Vaughn an extension. Dean is very young. There's not really any room for a linebacker to be promoted in this linebacker group currently. So I don't think it would make sense to use a day 2 pick on a linebacker.
I mean, it just depends on, what the value of everybody is in that draft and where you're getting these guys and what is already off the board and, how your roster shakes up. So you can always have the extra insurance because if Zach Ball goes down and then you're dealing with Nakobe Dean injury, then you're going to have to replace 2 different guys. So I think that's what
Yeah,
it'll
that,
come down
you
to.
can use that if at any position, really. It's like,
I
what
mean,
if
they're
both
usually a
starters
team
go
that
down?
doesn't they're usually a team that operates as if they have a guy already in that place, but they're looking to upgrade over time of that position. They'll draft a guy that is like an experiment in the first round. That's what they've done for a lot of guys. But if you look at what they did last year and how their draft picks have been since like 2021 and how they've been contributing right away in 2022, you could even make the same case for it. They contribute right away. Maybe their philosophy changes, especially with the amount of guys that they lost in the offseason. They might look for an immediate starter at one of those impactful positions. So I would think, I mean, I saw a recent mock draft having Luther Burden at 32. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, you have Jahan Dotson. I'd rather ride out another year of Jahan Dotson, see what he has. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, off the board, tight end in play, offensive line in play, D line always in play, edge
D
rusher
line,
always in
yeah,
play,
you're definitely going to see
corner low key in
them take
play,
D line
but
within the first 2
corner would
years.
have to be someone that they're like absolutely in love with, like
I could see
absolutely
corner.
in
I
love.
could definitely see corner. I think corner, D line, offensive tackle, safety, maybe even tight end. I think those are the likely positions
And
you're
they
going to
can get
see.
if the Michigan kid drops like if he's dropping like anywhere in the mid teens, like later teens, I think they should move up to go get him. I think he's an extremely special player.
Yeah, we'll see. Any more topics, or is it Phillies time?
No, it should be Phillies time. Real quickly though, with that, I mean, if they move up from 32 and they're targeting a specific tight end, maybe you can sweeten the deal by adding Dallas Goedert into the deal.
Oh
And
yeah,
then that,
absolutely.
gets a little bit like less draft resources that you have to add to it if they wanted to do that. So they obviously added a bunch of, backup level tight ends to the roster. So it doesn't look like anything they have done so far alludes to them having the successor of Dallas Goedert on the roster already. But that could change if they see somebody in the draft that they like. And there's a lot of really good tight ends in the draft. So, but thank you guys for tuning in to episode 91 of the Paisan Sports podcast. We're only 9 episodes away from episode 100, which is crazy. So we were talking about the Phillies. We were live during we were live during the
Trey
World
Turner
Series run.
signing.
We were live during the World Series run, weren't we? I
Oh,
think
that's right. Yeah,
we
yeah,
started, I think, September of 2022. So I think 2 months into that was the World Series. Yeah.
yeah. We
So
were there for all of the championship losses.
yeah, it's crazy. Like the Phillies, it seems like that World Series seasons gets more outdated and outdated to the point where it's almost 4 seasons now. It's crazy. I always
Yeah,
like jump back to like it was one season in between since the World Series appearance, but obviously time has gone on since then. But we'll be back next week with some reactions to the opening series for the Phillies. If there's any Eagles news, we'll update you guys on that, and we'll have a little news about the Sixers and the current state of their lottery draft selection that they look to keep. So we'll see you guys back at the beginning of next week.